When I came home from work, I found a note stuck to the fridge. She'd buggered off. It said we had nothing left to give each other. It said, "Do not contact me." Gemma, the bitch. Contact her. Contact her. She can rot in hell. 15 years. 15 bloody years. I went down the pub. I drank all that night. And the next. And the next. I kept looking round, expecting to see Gemma standing next to me. But of course she was never there. On the Saturday, I'd been at the pub all lunchtime, and I thought I'd go home and have a bite to eat, but when I got home, the flat seemed so empty. And I was about to go back to the pub when I heard a faint mewing. And I looked, and outside the kitchen window I saw this little cat, this little tabby cat sitting on the windowsill. I like tabbies. So I let it in and gave it a bowl of milk. God, it was hungry. It lapped it up in a couple of seconds or so. So I poured it another bowl, and it soon drank that up too. There was a football match on the telly, so I decided to stay in and watch it and not go to the pub after all. As I settled down on the sofa, the cat jumped up next to me. I left a packet of Smarties on the table because I like Smarties. And while I was having a smoke, I offered a few of the Smarties to the cat. She gulped them down. So I fed them to her one by one, and soon she'd finished the whole packet. I tried to watch the match, but Puss was nuzzling up against me, and I found it hard to concentrate. You know how it is when you meet someone and quite unexpectedly there's a sudden chemistry between you. Well, it was like that for Puss and me. By the end of the first half of the football match, Puss and I had had sex. I know what you're thinking, but it wasn't like that. No, not at all. It was an intense shared experience and marvellous, absolutely marvellous for both of us. I hadn't had such good sex since I don't know when. Puss was voracious. I seemed to be able to go on for hours and hours. Not like with Gemma. All those problems we'd had, they were completely forgotten. The next couple of weeks were paradise. I'd rush home from work and we'd grab a bite to eat and then make love until we were both exhausted. And afterwards, we felt a glorious sense of peace and completeness as we fell asleep together in each other's arms. I thought it would never end, but it did. And it wasn't the sex, that was as good as ever. But I began to have doubts about Pussy's feelings towards me. One afternoon, we'd been making love for hours. Puss jumped straight out of bed and began playing with her toy mouse, as usual. No thought of me. It was obviously we were losing that emotional rapport that had seemed so easy when we first met each other. Now all she seemed to care about was the sex. She couldn't get enough of that. But she seemed to be completely indifferent to what I was feeling. I felt used. That night was a disaster. I mean, I'll admit it. I tried, but it just wasn't happening. I tried to explain to Puss, but she looked back at me with those big green eyes, and I felt utterly useless. Puss seemed unable to see things from my point of view, and I couldn't understand what she wanted from me. That next morning we had a really terrible row. We both said things that we didn't really mean. At work I was in a bad mood all day. And I knew that all I wanted was for things to be as they had been when we first met. I bought a bumper packet of Smarties and I went home determined to make a fresh start. But when I got home, Puss wasn't waiting for me as she usually did. With a growing feeling of desperation, I searched round the flat. And until I discovered that in my distraction that morning, I'd left the bathroom window open. Puss had gone, disappeared. She'd left me. I felt devastated, overcome with a terrible sense of loss and anger for our throwing away something that had been in its way for a while perfect. I rushed outside and wandered round the local streets for hours, calling her name and rattling the packet of Smarties. Would I ever see my darling Puss again? In the rain, I was passing the garages behind my flat when I heard a familiar mew. It was Puss. I'd have known that sweet sound anywhere. Looking up, I could see her on top of one of the garages. But she wasn't alone. She was with a seedy old tomcat that had been hanging round the flats for months. The slag. The treacherous slag. There was a rubbish bin next to the garage. I clambered up on it and stretched out a trembling hand towards Puss. I knew her weakness for Smarties. It was that easy. As she ate the sweets from my hand, I grabbed her. One twist of her skinny neck, and that was that. She thought she had me under her paw. I showed her. It's something disgusting about her. A dead cat. I shuddered as I dropped her into the garbage bin. Everything had happened too quickly. I was heartbroken and alone again. Oh, Puss, why did it have to end like this? The next day I popped into the local pet shop. on my way back from work. They had the sweetest little Staffordshire Terrier puppy. It was love at first sight, and I bought her there and then. I've named her Pup, and she's an absolute sweetheart.